Once the momentum of this insight fades, turn to feelings, perceptions, formations, and consciousness. Divide them into their various aspects and examine their nature. When you see them as insubstantial, like bubbles, a mirage, a plantain tree, or an illusion, you will realize that there is nothing to cling to. When mindfulness of the body's multiplicity fades, shift your attention to the other aggregates, feelings, perception, mental formations, and consciousness, and examine each as a composite. When you have observed thoroughly, seeing feelings like bubbles, perception like a mirage, mental formations like a plantain tree, and consciousness like an illusion, you will recognize that nothing in the 5 aggregates is worthy of attachment. In this meditation practice, focus on observing the nature of the aggregates as a multiplicity, a collection of many parts. Continuously divide them with wisdom until only various components remain. At that point, the true nature of the aggregates is fully revealed. Mentally dissecting the body to deduce that it is not I seems relatively easier, while observing the 4 aggregates, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness as devoid of self is a bit more challenging. Where exactly are feelings located? When you feel pain, where is the pain? It's hard to pinpoint its exact location. For example, if the skin on your hand is injured, the wound hurts, but it's not the flesh that feels pain. So, where is the painful sensation? Where does it come from? This requires careful observation. 1. Observing the aggregate of feeling. Feeling means the experience of sensation. Since what is experienced can be divided into 3 types, pleasure, pain, and neutral, feelings can be categorized into 3 kinds, pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral, each distinct from the others. Pleasant feelings, for example, can be further divided into 6 types based on the means through which they arise. For instance, when the eye faculty, visual object, and visual consciousness come together, eye contact arises, giving rise to a pleasant feeling. Similarly, pleasant feelings can arise from ear contact, nose contact, tongue contact, body contact, and mind contact. In other words, when the 6 faculties meet, the 6 sense objects, 6 kinds of sensations emerge, each different from the others. When a consciousness arises, the corresponding contact emerges, giving rise to the accompanying feeling, such as pleasant and unpleasant. This kind of feeling is subtle, different from coarse sensations. For example, the universal mental factors that give rise to visual consciousness include contact, attention, feeling, perception, and volition. This feeling arises quickly and subtly, which we cannot notice. It should be a neutral feeling that is neither pleasant nor unpleasant. For example, when light shines on your retina, you usually feel nothing, no pleasant or unpleasant sensation. However, if the light is too strong, you will feel uncomfortable. If the light is glaring, you will immediately close your eyes to protect them. If the light is too hot or its frequency and energy are too intense, your eyes won't be able to endure it, as it can cause damage. When we receive ordinary electromagnetic waves, a neutral sensation arises. Then, we will generate visual consciousness, leading to attachment. Our sensations include the feeling of smell, fragrant or foul, the feelings of eating food, hearing sounds, and seeing objects. When visual consciousness arises and the sixth consciousness discriminates, mental factors like desire or aversion emerge. Thus, we become entangled in greed, anger, and ignorance. Each of the six senses produces its corresponding sensations when encountering their objects. The sensations we experience most frequently are bodily sensations felt in the skin, internal organs, and other parts of the body. Wherever there is illness or blockage, pain arises. We cannot constantly eat, smell, or see. But if there is physical pain, we continuously feel it. Therefore, bodily sensations, pleasant or unpleasant, are the most common. Feelings arise due to karmic seeds stored in the eighth consciousness. You may not understand why you like certain sensations, dislike others, and feel indifferent to some. This is the result of karma. By examining the objects we perceive, we will realize that feelings are constantly changing depending on the object, time, and other factors. When pleasant objects arise, we feel happy. When unpleasant objects appear, we feel sorrow or sadness. When neutral objects arise, we feel neither pleasure nor distress. Perceiving something as pleasant or unpleasant is the result of our karmic habits. External objects don't possess inherent pleasantness or unpleasantness. They exist as they are, devoid of intrinsic nature. You like some objects, considering them pleasant, and dislike others. This is your karmic habit at work. External objects are neither pleasant nor unpleasant. It is the mind that assigns these labels. When you find something pleasant, you arouse attachment. If you are used to seeing something in past lives, you will find it appealing in this life. This is the mental pattern of humans. When someone else's child is born, you might find them unattractive. Yet, even if your child looks like an alien, they seem lovely in your eyes. Because they are pleasant to you, you perceive them as beautiful. In summary, once the six senses come into contact with their objects, defiled feelings arise in us deludedly and involuntarily. Even a moment of feeling can be endlessly divided based on different senses, objects, and dimensions. These feelings are countless and illusory, like bubbles. Is there anything in them worth our pursuit and attachment? Do they hold any real significance? When feelings arise, we don't know where they come from. When pain disappears, we don't know where it goes. Therefore, the aggregate of feeling is a mental phenomenon. It is the mind that experiences feelings. The mind is neither outside nor inside, so where exactly is it? When we observe feelings carefully, we cannot find where they reside. They are illusory, without a fixed abode or inherent nature. Feelings arise, change, and cease moment by moment. Does the aggregate of feeling have an inherent nature or a self? Can you find a self in it? There is no self in the aggregate of feeling. It is like a bubble that can easily burst. You should have seen soap bubbles. They are illusory and fragile. The aggregate of feeling is just like that. 2. Observing the aggregate of perception. What is the aggregate of perception? It is the mental factor of perception among the universal mental factors. Not only does the mind consciousness have perception, but the consciousness is of the eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body also have perceptions that generate mental images. We often mention eye consciousness, which requires the mental factor of perception to arise. Only after the mental factor of perception generates an image does recognition occur. Similarly, ear consciousness generating the image of sound also relies on the mental factor of perception. As mentioned earlier, perception is a false illusion arising from delusion. This meditation instruction compares perception to a mirage. You may have seen a mirage before. From a distance, it appears real, but in reality, it's an illusion. Similarly, the aggregate of perception is a false illusion, arising and ceasing moment by moment. The appearances we perceive are produced by ourselves. Since your eighth consciousness contains the seed, when you encounter an object, an image arises in your mind. Perception refers to the arising of a mental image, and these images don't exist inherently. Perception means when a sense faculty and an object come into contact, the mind generates an image out of nothing. The mental image doesn't exist intrinsically, it arises out of nowhere. When a sense faculty meets an object, a mental image appears. For example, a chili pepper itself is not spicy. When it touches your tongue, you feel the spiciness. However, when it's in other parts of your body, like your stomach or intestines, you don't sense the spiciness. Yet, when it's excreted, you might feel the spiciness again. Therefore, the chili pepper itself is not spicy. It becomes spicy under certain conditions. It is our mind that generates the impression and sensation of spiciness. By pondering in this way, you will understand that the chili pepper itself is not spicy. The same principle applies to the perception of visual objects. The objects of sight don't inherently exist. When light, an electromagnetic wave, the visible form, shines on a flower, and the visual faculty encounters the visible form, the appearance and color of the flower arise in our minds. Such images are generated by our visual consciousness. There are no external objects. If there were external objects, they would remain visible even without light. Why do they only appear when light shines on them and become invisible without light? It is only when light illuminates an object and reflects to us that we perceive its appearance. What we see are actually images formed by light, electromagnetic waves. Let's take an obvious example. Why can a camera capture an image? Does that image truly exist? No, it doesn't. How does a camera capture an image? Only when an object reflects light does the camera detect that light, forming an image. In reality, there is no image in the camera. The camera merely records light. After capturing the light, you still need your eyes to see the image. Without eyes, is there an image in the camera? Think about it. If you don't use your eyes to look at the photo, is there an image there? The photo itself has no image. It's dark. After the photo is developed, you need light to see it. Without light, is there an image in the photo? The same principle applies to the images on a phone. They must emit light to be visible. If they didn't emit light, would you be able to see the images? When you open a photo on a phone, the phone reproduces the same light it captured when taking the picture. Thus, we see the image. Whether it's a photo or a camera, we can only see the images through our eyes. The images are generated by our eyes, not captured by the camera. The camera simply records electromagnetic waves. Reflect on this. All images are produced by our visual consciousness. There is no inherently existing external object. Observe the person you cling to. If their life consists of n moments, they can be divided into indistinct images. In reality, we are looking at the images generated by our eyes, like what we perceive in a dream. These images are all generated by our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind. We live in our own worlds, where other beings are created by ourselves. They are supporting characters in our drama. Each person lives in their own world, always as the protagonist. The images you see are created by your eyes to play a role in your story. Each lifetime is like a drama, in which others are supporting roles. Everyone is self-centered unless they have overcome the attachment to the self. Once you uproot self-grasping, your mind expands. At that point, you no longer identify the 5 aggregates as me, and your mind encompasses the entire universe. When the mind is not egocentric, what does it become? If the mind doesn't perceive the 5 aggregates as me and is not self-centered, it can expand infinitely throughout boundless space. As long as you cling to the notion of I, you remain trapped. Your mind is attached to the body, feelings, perceptions, and mental formations. Mental formations refer to effort. You may think, I am doing something. But in reality, the door is the aggregate of mental formations, which has nothing to do with you. There is no I. However, we mistakenly believe that there is an I engaging in various activities. We think I am eating, playing, ice skating, singing, or dancing. In reality, the door is the aggregate of mental formations. Where is the I? the seventh and sixth consciousness is clean to the existence of I. Many people mistake the aggregate of mental formations for I. For instance, those who enjoy sports might perceive the aggregate of mental formations as I because they often engage in physical activities. Some people like to let their minds wander. Women tend to have rich perceptions, perhaps because they traditionally took on the role of housewife who tended to think a lot. Excessive thoughts can lead to depression. Men often engage in battles, endeavors, and fights to support their families, so they tend to have rich mental formations. Hence, men usually perceive the aggregate of mental formations as I. Some men enjoy hunting, some favor playing sports, and some even take pleasure in warfare and killing. When life lacks excitement, they seek thrills and may even find excitement in killing others. A Western person takes pleasure in warfare and goes wherever there is a war. He cannot bear to be without it, treating killing as a game and finding exhilaration in victory. How terrifying men's mental formations can be. Yet, they are unaware of this, mistakenly identifying the aggregate of mental formations as I. 3. Observing the aggregate of mental formations. The aggregate of mental formations refers to volitional activities that propel the mind towards its objects. It includes two categories: associated formations and non-associated formations. All mental factors, except sensation and perception, belong to the aggregate of mental formations. Wholesome mental factors include faith, diligence, conscience, shame, non-attachment, non-anger, non-bewilderment, and pliancy. Unwholesome mental factors include attachment, anger, ignorance, resentment, hatred, hypocrisy, deceit, lack of conscience, and lack of shame. Additionally, there are mental factors like contact and attention. All these belong to the aggregate of mental formations. Let's take attachment as an example. In terms of location, there are objects here and objects there. In terms of time, there are objects from the past, present, and future, objects we cling to in childhood, youth, and old age. In terms of appearance, there are various shapes, colors, styles, etc. Because the objects are diverse, the attachment that clings to these objects also varies. The mental factor of attachment belongs to the aggregate of mental formations. It is a volitional effort. By inference, each mental factor in the aggregate of mental formations can be endlessly subdivided. Upon thorough observation, we will realize that the aggregate of mental formations is merely a collection of numerous distinct phenomena. It is like a banana tree. When peeled away layer by layer, it turns out to be nothing more than a false combination. Each mental factor has its seed and will produce its corresponding function. When a seed encounters the causes and conditions, it will give rise to the corresponding mental factor. For example, the mental factor of attachment gives rise to attachment. All mental factors, such as lack of conscience and shame, have their seeds, which can give rise to their corresponding mental formations. There is no self. It is not I who is doing something. It happens automatically. It is similar to how a computer program operates under a command. The karmic seeds we have automatically generate corresponding objects under certain conditions, and the mental factors begin to function. 4. Observing the aggregate of consciousness. The aggregate of consciousness typically refers to the 6 consciousnesses. Like illusions conjured by a magician, the aggregate of consciousness is merely a false appearance projected by the mind, ultimately giving rise to 6 types of recognition. The Abhidharma Kosha in both the Mahayana and Hinayana traditions provides a detailed analysis of the structure of sentient beings' body and mind. Like grinding flour, it systematically dissects the 5 aggregates, 12 sense bases, and 18 sense elements, revealing that there is no singular, inherently existing sentient being. What we refer to as a sentient being is merely a temporary composite of multiple components. Observing the contents in the 5 aggregates with wisdom is like opening a warehouse of body and mind. We find only various forms, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousnesses without anything else. Upon thorough observation, we will recognize that body and mind are merely aggregates of countless illusions. Without anything we can cling to, we can analyze compounded phenomena from many perspectives: impermanence, illusion, all causes and conditions, dependent arising. No matter which angle we take, we will find that the 5 aggregates are devoid of inherent nature. Continuously maintain this insight until it fades. Once it fades, do not try to prolong it. Instead, turn to another investigation. It is crucial to maintain mindfulness continuously. This instruction is clear. After recognizing that the object is not worthy of clinging, we should maintain this mindfulness, right attitude until it ceases. If it fades away, don't try to prolong it deliberately. Instead, shift your attention to another object and continue to analyze and examine it. It's like carrying a load. If your right shoulder gets tired, don't force it. Instead, switch the weight to your left shoulder. In this way, you won't strain your body and can keep going for longer. Similarly, why do we practice many different methods? Because if you get tired of practicing one method, you can switch to another. For example, if you get tired of meditating on multiplicity, you can switch to impermanence. If you grow weary of meditating on impermanence, you can switch to impurity. Each of these approaches can help counteract self-grasping. During analytical meditation, we should adapt to the situation. When a realization fades, shift to another investigation topic to keep the mind in its optimal state. Otherwise, forcing mindfulness to continue can cause mental fatigue, leading to dullness or agitation. This instruction is important for beginners. Use different methods to deal with self-grasping from multiple perspectives.